Okay, and it looks like we are counting down. Cool. Great. And now we are officially live, and I'll keep going with our slideshow. So our mission at Historic Seattle is saving meaningful places to foster lively communities. And I know, all the technical difficulties today. We're gonna make it though. Not that slide, this slide. Okay, so we know that our properties and our programs occupy the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples. This land acknowledgement is not a substitute for developing relationships with Indigenous communities or for honoring Indigenous stories as we share our collective history, but it's the first step in recognizing the people whose land we occupy. And before I turn it over to our awesome presenters, I do want to thank some of our sponsors and then a couple of other folks. So first, thank you to Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers, Local 1, Washington and Alaska, Daniels Real Estate, The Greystone and Gridiron, Selin Community Foundation, and Urban Villages and Railspur. And of course, I want to thank my Historic Seattle colleagues, especially Naomi, for making all the education programs possible. I do not do this by myself, and I absolutely would not want to. So thank you all. So here's how tonight is going to go. I'm going to wrap up my remarks in just a minute or so, and then I'll turn it over to our presenters. They're going to have a conversation, tell some stories, give you some awesome background about the Seattle chapter of the Black Panther Party and the significance of the wall. Throughout the conversation, we encourage all of you on Zoom and in YouTube to please share your questions for our speakers in the chat. At the end of Elmer and Stephanie's chat, I will share the questions out and we'll get to as many of them as we can. And just a quick reminder to all of you that this space, this virtual space that we're sharing together, is a safe space for all participants. Racism, sexism, homophobic comments, discrimination, insults, all the bad stuff will not be tolerated. So please be respectful of the space that we're sharing together for listening, learning, and exploration. And now I'm going to tuck out into the background and turn our program over to our honored and esteemed guest, Stephanie Johnson-Toliver, President of the Black Heritage Society of Washington State, and Elmer Dixon, co-founder of the Seattle chapter of the Black Panther Party. Stephanie and Elmer, we're going to go ahead and pin you. And when you're ready for me to show the slides, just let me know.
All right. Sorry, everybody. I'm getting kind of comfy here. Hello. And I see Elmer over there joining us from Portugal at 1:30 in the morning. Amazing, Elmer. First of all, I want to thank Taylor and Historic Seattle for hosting the program this evening and partnering with the Black Heritage Society of Washington State to find a way to and help us, I guess I want to say, help BHS in finding their way to becoming an advocate for saving places. It's always exciting when I can share this space with Elmer, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the known and unknown truths of the history that is the legacy of the Seattle chapter Black Panther Party, and talk about saving the People's Wall at 20th Avenue and Spruce Street. Before I dive into this conversation with Elmer on the People's Wall, I just really want to be clear that the preservation work is not new to BHS. It's not that we haven't recognized the need to advocate for African American heritage sites, but BHS has strongly been engaged in collecting and managing a very large public collection of regional Black history that is archived and located at the Mohi Tom McQuaid Resource Center in Georgetown. So we're standing on the shoulders of our founders. We uphold the founding mission, but also know that our organization has evolved as a community stakeholder, right? We step aside and outside the archive to be visible advocates for the preservation of tangible space that defines our culture. So clearly, the data does not lie to us when it comes to nominations and designations of heritage sites that are local and statewide. We're lending our voice and our action to call, and that's important, the action to call for better representation of the preservation bill to move considerations forward, restorations, conservation, nominations, and designations like the People's Law. So Elmer, to you, again, thank you for zooming in from Portugal. It's really good to see you. You are forever the revolutionary who believed and believes that justice and human rights and dignity are justifiable right that should be afforded to everyone, right? And the power to make this happen is in the hands of people. So speak about the founding mission of Seattle Chapter Black Panther Party, how it influenced Seattle politics and civic vision. And then we can jump right into saving some interpretation of the wall. I know that you said you're unable to stay with us for the entire hour, but I hope that you'll be able to hang out for as long as possible. Because I think first, before you jump into your response, let's play your brother's comment. Taylor, can we please hear Aaron Dixon's comment? It's just a couple minutes.
Absolutely. Just give me 1 second to pull that up.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right.
Yes, history informs us, and it is so important to keep up with our history. And I'm asking people to support the mural on 19th and Spruce, which is where the location painted in 1969 when the
Ooh,
Oh,
okay. Okay, a little technical difficulty
a
there.
little bit.
Okay. Well, one of the things we said we could do is, if we're having trouble with some of our recorded pieces, is to share those out later. So if you think we can listen, that'd be great. If not, we can either circle back or share it out beyond this conversation.
I'm actually just refreshing the page and I will message you when it's back, but I think you all should continue and I will do my best to pull that clip back up.
Okay, Elmer, let's just dive into it then on the founding mission of the chapter. And wow, that was 1968, right? 50 plus years ago. So tell us.
Well, I think it's important to understand that the Seattle chapter didn't have a different mission than the Black Panther Party as a whole, because we were all one organization. And when Huey Newton and Bobby Seale started the Black Panther Party in October of 1966, their mission was to launch a political party that represented the needs of Black people, because Black people's needs were not being adequately represented through any form of government or leadership. We felt that it was important that we demonstrate to the community that it was our right, our constitutional right, to defend ourselves. And we had grown up during an era of assassinations. And while Aaron and I marched with Dr. King when he came here in '61, we weren't of the philosophy of turn the other cheek. We followed the philosophy of Malcolm X, who said, if someone slaps you, slap them back. And that was what Huey and Bobby did when they launched the party, was to slap collectively the American system back and stand up and defend our community. So our mission was one mission, which was to represent the needs of Black people in particular, and all oppressed people in general, through the coalitions that we would build. But that was our mission, was to launch a revolutionary party, political party that was set out to represent the needs of the Black community.
Right. It was a pretty big wake-up call. So I think for Seattle, for all communities, I mean, across the Black community, across all communities, in '68. And it even started prior to that, didn't it, with the BSU, with you and Larry Gossett and others organizing the first BSU at Garfield High School?
Well, you know, at that time in the late '60s, what was happening, Stephanie, around the country was the rise of the Black Power movement, as it was called, coming out of the civil rights era. Young Black people were standing up and recognizing the color of their skin. In fact, James Brown came out with the song, "I'm Black and I'm Proud." And so it was the Black and Proud era. It was the era of waking up and realizing that that it was okay, it was good to be Black. And it really began here in Seattle when Stokely Carmichael came here in 1967 and gave a speech at Garfield High School, and hundreds, if not thousands, of young Black people, Black men and Black women, came to hear Stokely speak. Stokely Carmichael was the national spokesperson for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC. And I remember when he was speaking that he said the reason why Black people don't have freedom is because we don't love ourselves. In fact, we hated ourselves. We hate the fact that we were Black. And he gave all of these analogies about how white is good and Black is bad. Dove soap, angel food cake, devil's food cake, all of these analogies. And I remember growing up on the playground in Madrona Park, that if someone called me Black, those were fighting words, because we had been conditioned, we had been programmed to think that Black was bad. And so this was an awakening point in terms of identity, realizing that we had an identity. And so we began to grow our afros out. We began to, in fact, I joined SNCC and became the co-chair of the Seattle chapter of SNCC. And that same year, Larry Gossett and Aaron and Carl Miller started the Black Student Union at the University of Washington. When I started my senior year at Garfield in '67, myself and a few of my cohorts, Anthony Ware, who later became a member of the party, and Kathy Jones, a fiery young sister, we descended upon the principal's office and demanded to have a Black student union. And he wouldn't give us a Black student union. He said we already had a boys club, which later, of course, that year would be called a men's club because of Larry Taylor, who was the president of the Garfield Men's Club. But we said that doesn't represent Black students. We wanted a Black student. So we went down to the superintendent's office, and Kathy Jones got in the superintendent's face and told him that we needed a Black studies program. We were going to have a Black student union, whether he liked it or not. And he sent us away. And so we, back at Garfield, we disrupted the PEP assemblies. We called a boycott of all classes, and none of the students went to class. And we ended up getting our BSU, and became the first Black student union on the West Coast of the United States. So we were growing our awareness. We were becoming activists at that point. And it was months later that Franklin High School had called us and told us that they were being harassed and bullied, and so Larry and Aaron came now over from the UW, and myself and Anthony came over from Garfield, Kathy Jones. We met with the students at the Beanery across from Franklin. They told us what was going down, and we said, okay, that's it. And we marched across the street and kicked the principal out, kicked the vice principal out, kicked the counselors out and the secretaries out, and told them we were taking over the school. And we stayed overnight, and the next day the phone rang, and we answered Franklin High School like we were running the school, which we were. And the principal was on the phone begging us to leave, saying that they could have their BSU. So it was a casual victory, but it was a week later that I was in my geometry class when the phone rang, and they told me they wanted me in the office, which wasn't unusual because I had been kicked out of school during this boycott. And when I stepped out of the classroom, there were two detectives there that handcuffed me and took me to juvie. And unbeknownst to me at the time, Aaron and Larry and Carl Miller were being arrested out at the UW. A couple of my cohorts were arrested on the other side of the school. And when we got to juvie, we saw the commotion around the TV. All the kids were crowded around the TV, and MLK had just been recently assassinated around the same time that we were being arrested. And it was like they knew, and they got us off the street so that we wouldn't be able to organize in the community. A week later, when we traveled to San Francisco State University to attend the West Coast Conference of Black Student Unions, the keynote speaker that night was none other than Chairman Bobby Seale. And Bobby was giving the most fiery speech that any of us had ever heard since or before. And he was mad. And he was mad because 2 days after MLK was assassinated, the first member to join the Black Panther Party, little Bobby Hutton, who was 16 when he joined, was murdered in the streets of Oakland on April 6, 1968, at the hands of the Oakland Pig Department while in police custody. And he was furious at that. And he talked about our blood running in the streets and until this revolution was won. And you could see the line being drawn in the sand, so to speak, that most of those 400 or 500 students that had come across the country to attend this conference were scared to death. But there were a handful of us, my brother and I, and a couple of brothers from Franklin. We made a beeline to Chairman Bobby Seale. We told him we wanted to start a chapter of the Black Panther Party. He told us to come to little Bobby's funeral the next day. And we went over, I remember going across the Bay Bridge into West Oakland and seeing hundreds of young Black men and women in leather jackets and berets in military formation. I remember thinking, this looks like a Black army. And Bobby had saved us some seats up in front of the church for us to be able to witness what was about to happen. And when we got into the church, the walls were lined with Black men and women in leather jackets and berets all the way down the church. And down in the front was little Bobby's coffin, and it was draped in a flag, a Black Panther flag. It was a surreal scene, to see something like that, to see something dynamic and as powerful as that. And after the ceremony, the casket was opened because, like Mamie Till in Chicago, after her son was murdered, Mrs. Hutton wanted the community to see what the police had done to her son. So the coffin was open, and I remember filing by, and I can still see little Bobby's image in my brain today, in my mind today. It was burned into my mind as he was laying in his coffin in a Panther draped flag, in his leather jacket, his beret, and his Free Huey button. And I looked into the coffin. He was 17 years old, and I was 17 years old at the time. And I remember thinking that could be me lying there. And it was at that point, I knew I was ready to die for the revolution. You see, what a lot of people don't realize, that we were the first chapter formed outside of the state of California. But up until till that point, the party had been a local organization in Oakland, California, with one other chapter down in Los Angeles. We were the third chapter overall. And little Bobby's death, coupled with the Free Huey movement, sparked the growth of the Black Panther Party overnight. Bobby told us to come back to Seattle. 2 weeks later, he was here. He was in our home. That was where he laid down the rules of the Black Panther Party. And he told us that we needed to have 1,000 rounds of ammunition and 2 weapons, because he said they're coming to kill you. He said, when you stand up for revolution and you stand up for righteousness, and they know that you're not jiving, then they're going to come to try to kill you. So you need to be prepared. He said you had to read 2 hours a day. You had to go to political education classes twice a week. We called them PE classes, because we needed to prepare ourselves to be revolutionaries and study past revolutions. So this was not a Seattle mission. This was the foundation of the Black Panther Party, to defend the community, to defend our freedom, to fight for our freedom, not to beg for our rights, but to demand our God-given rights, and to take them if we needed to by any means necessary, which was the mantra of Malcolm X, by any means necessary. And that's where the explosion of the Black Panther Party began. When Bobby left Seattle, he went all across the country and set up chapters between here, Chicago, and New York City. And eventually we had chapters in London and France and Sweden and Denmark. We had a chapter in as far away as New Zealand and in Australia, an international section in Algeria, and connections with the ANC in South Africa, the People's Republic, the People's Liberation Army in Mozambique and Angola, as well as connections to the Ho Chi Minh Trail and the People's Republic of China. We were an international movement, and that happened within the span a little over 6 months. And so that's where that explosion of the Black Panther Party occurred.
Yeah, well, I mean, truly for the people, by the people, right? And thank you for sharing all of that history, you know, with everyone who's on this at this meeting tonight, and it'll be shared out widely beyond here. And I remember 1967, and when Stokely Carmichael came to town, and I tried my best to sneak out of the house that night. I made it some other nights, but that night I didn't make it. So, but I really felt the energy in 1967. And when I was ushered off to Whitman College in 1969, and everything was, you know, popping off here in Seattle. And I always say I wanted to be Angela Davis so bad. It was so difficult in Walla Walla. You know what I mean? So I did come back to Seattle and to the UW and worked with Larry for a number of years there. But again, getting to the chapter, the headquarters, and the first headquarters being on 34th, right off of Union and near your home and near Madrona Playfield, right?
Yes.
And so that first headquarters, yeah, was maybe you were there for about a year, barely a year, 68 to 69. And then what prompted
about a year.
Yeah. And then what prompted the I don't know, I guess the action that needed to happen to move from 34th to 20th and Spruce, where the second headquarters was located with the People's Law?
Well, we had, prior to the office on 34th, for a very brief time where we were meeting to get organized, we had an unofficial office right on the corner of MLK, which was back then Empire Way, and Madison, up above the cleaners that was there on that corner. But Bobby told us, the chairman told us, that we needed to have a storefront office so that the people would be able to see us. We would be visible, so they could come by and get questions answered, so that we could actually be serving the community with our 10-10-10 program, which was how we divided the community up into 10 sections so that we can organize the city. So we had that storefront office, as did most chapters across the country. But what we realized very quickly was that those were targets, and we couldn't adequately defend them. Our office was attacked that summer of '68. Aaron and Curtis were set up for stealing a typewriter. We had no way to secure that office. And this was true around the country. In fact, central headquarters, which was on the original central headquarters, which was on Shattuck in Oakland, was shot up by drunk Oakland cops in the middle of the night. There's a famous a video showing bullet holes in the window at central headquarters. And Bobby told us, and Huey from jail told us that we needed to have an office that we could fortify. And so the office on, and we had to be able to have a barracks where Panthers could sleep, where regular, where the rank and file regular Panthers that were there daily could sleep. We had other Panthers that didn't live there, but we had a cadre that did live there, myself included. And so the building that you see there on 20th and Spruce, my brother incorrectly identified it as 19th and Spruce, but that's his 73-year-old brain. But I understand. But there it is right there. And what you see is on the left, the door on the left is the entrance into the downstairs where our office was. And also we ended up putting our first free medical clinic in there. And you can see on the sign there, the Walton Butch Armstead Community Center. Butch Armstead was one of our first Panthers to get murdered here in Seattle. And then the Sidney Miller Free Medical Clinic, whose name is also on the sign there. Both of those were named after fallen comrades. And so downstairs is where we had the actual office, and the clinic was in the back of that on that floor. And then to the right, you see another door, and that takes you upstairs where the barracks were. And you can probably see in this photo that there are steel and plywood sandwiches on the windows on both upper level and lower levels. And at the bottom are gun flaps where you could, we had them on a little hinge where you could open the gun flaps so that we could see out to defend our community. And then we had sandbags lining the walls, both downstairs and upstairs, and the walls. The doors were heavily fortified with door stops, and they were about a foot, maybe a foot and a half thick, reinforced. So we were ready for attack because we knew that they were coming after us. That now our this is the aftermath. Our office was, in fact, that's not even the whole scene that was in that downstairs. We had built a bunker right there in front of that doorway where it was raised up, and it had sandbags on the top so that bullets couldn't come and hit us from across the street if they were firing at us from across the street. But that's a pretty good, it looks like somebody moved some of those sandbags around before they took that picture, because it was a lot more organized than that. The sandbags had to be cleaned. We had to keep the area clean because our weapons could get jammed up from the sand, and so we had to keep it constantly cleaned. And so, but that was what we had to do to fend off attack from the attacking armies of police and ATF agents who were trying to murder us in our sleep.
But this was the location too where you organized around your efforts with the newspaper, the breakfast program, right? As well as the clinic.
Yeah, everything happened out of this office in terms of the organizing. We had 5 breakfast programs around the city. We had the first one, the initial breakfast program was at the Madrona Presbyterian Church. And that was at the launch of the breakfast program in February of 1969. When we reopened in the fall of 69, we had a breakfast program at Atlantic Street Center. And then we built one at High Point Community Church, as you can see there in Holly Park. We also ended up one at Yesler Terrace and Rainier Vista. We ended up with 5 locations across the city in low-income communities where there are large concentrations of Black people. But we not only fed Black kids, we fed whatever kids walked in the door. But all of our other programs, you know, the distribution of the paper was out of that office. We were one of the highest selling chapters in the country. And then we had multiple other programs. We had the free busing to prisons program. We had sickle cell anemia screening that launched out of that office, a free shoe program, or free clothing program. There's Aaron in front of our center there with our new sign. It was new at that point, and the office probably wasn't fully fortified. It looks so fresh and clean. But that's we operated. We had a pretty smoothly run operation. So while this was the hub, a lot of the activities took place out in most of the activities took place out in the community.
Right. I mean, this is a true legacy and history that really came out of a really fast-paced organizational skills building and call to action, for the people. Because when you say from 1968 to then by 1970, you're here at this location, the second headquarters. And
fall of 69.
Or 69, yeah. And so then it would have been 1970 when you commissioned Dion Henderson to then paint the wall. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. And we commissioned Dion, and what you see there, the wall, part of it is demolished because the wall actually, as you see, it extends from the south tip where Angela is all the way around to where some of the New York 21 are holding flags there. It went, the actual New York 21 went up the stairway. The stairway is where that bend is. And then there was, of course, the other end of the stairway that wrapped around the corner. And there were other Panthers that were on there. Little Bobby Hutton was on there. Eldridge Cleaver was on that original wall. So there were other Panther figures that were on the original wall itself. But Dion was commissioned to paint the original wall. And it was the wall, as we called it, the People's Wall, because it represented defiance. When all the way at the left there, Angela's image, she represents the strong Black woman with her big afro, and that's part of the identity part of growing into our Black identity as a people, and the pride and respect that we had around our community. And the jazz great there, Charlie Parker, represents the historical musical figure that always was the soul of Black communities. And then right next to him is Bobby Seale, chained and gagged in a U.S. courtroom, where everyone could see while he was trying to defend himself. And that happened that fall of 69, just before Dion painted the wall. And right above the name are the figures of us standing in front of the Capitol and on Olympia, also representing defiance. And then, of course, Huey is flanked on the other side of where Bobby is. And then you've got Malcolm These and then the New York 21 Panthers, and then there's the names of our fallen comrades. We added that to the wall when we had it restored in 2016 during our 40th anniversary. Not 2016, 2018. During our did I say 18? No, it was 2008.
Yeah,
it was 2008. Eddie Walker traced the. He knew what the original. We had pictures of the original wall, and Eddie did it identically to what Dion had done. Now Dion was here during that restoration, but his wife, she was a devout Christian, and she wouldn't allow him to touch the wall. Said it was secular art, and that it was, and so it was against her religion, and so Dion couldn't touch the wall. He was abiding by his wife's wishes, so which is why we had Eddie do it. But he oversaw that restoration and
well, that's
approved
the first
of it.
time I'd heard that. That's the first time I heard that about Eddie and why Eddie, so that makes perfect sense to me now.
Well, and yes, it does make perfect sense. And the other reason why Eddie, see, Eddie, as you know, had a lot of Black art and murals around the CD. Some were, and I don't even, they may still be in there in the Catholic Community Services building. Some of his work, he used to paint in the dots. Some of his work was in there. And then probably one of his most, probably one of his most recognized images of the Black Panther Party was the one he did of Carolyn Downs in there's pictures of it in the clinic, the current clinic, but that it was destroyed when the building was sold because he painted it on a wall in the building that we had purchased up on 34th and Pike. We purchased that building, and when you went into the clinic, Carolyn's image, it was a whole big wall that he had painted with dots, and some of the Panther kids were around her feet. She was looking at the kids. A couple of those kids were mine. One was hers, and it was a great painting. But Eddie had done that. Eddie had always been around the Black Panther Party. He had always been a contributor. In fact, Eddie was a Panther, and so it made perfect sense that Eddie, we would ask Eddie to do that. I've asked Eddie if he would come and do the current restoration project, and he is willing and able and wants to do it, to put it back in the condition that it should be in. And so he's always been an advocate for us.
We would love to talk to Eddie. We would love to talk to Eddie.
I've got his information.
And we'll catch everybody up and bring everybody up to speed on where we're at in this whole process. But it would be wonderful to meet Eddie and talk to Eddie. There's so much history around all of this, and what you're speaking to about Carolyn Downs and how the Sidney Miller Clinic was this catalyst to what we have today at the Carolyn Downs Family Medical Center on Yesler, just a few blocks from the People's Wall. And that's why it's so important that we maintain this wall, stabilize this wall, and hopefully move it forward for landmark designation. So that's what we hope to do, Elmer. And there is a clip. Oh gosh, there's Naeem and I standing at the wall, smiley faces. We were asked to come out to a community event and share with the community about the People's Wall and saving the People's Wall. And one of those people that showed up that day was Joanna Cullen. And I think Joanna might be listening in, but She's a longtime member with the Squire Park Community Council. And part of this effort, we're calling it Saving the People's Wall, and it is a community effort. And the Squire Park Community Council, from the very beginning, when I started talking about the wall, were there and at the forefront to say, what can we do to help preserve the wall or landmark the wall? They even had a neighbor that would come out and mow that little bit of lawn in front of the wall just to keep the weeds down. Taylor, would you play that clip from Joanna? Joanna has a couple minutes she wants to share.
The People's Wall. I probably encountered these images and this mural in like 1981, maybe a little earlier, maybe a little later. But the iconic images and style of art immediately spoke to me and said this must represent an important piece of Seattle history related to the Black Panthers. Sometimes I would walk and I would think, now where was that mural? And at first it was this mystery to me, although luckily the name of the artist is there, and the dedicated to the fallen wall gave me a clue to some of the people that were very important in this time. And I only recognized maybe a few of the names at the time, but those things did help, like research and think about how, what was happening and who was involved. And over time, the wall went through many stages. Sometimes it looked like people cared, and other times it looked like no one cared, and that the wall would fall into complete disrepair. And finally, God, it was amazing to think, probably more than 30 years later, I encountered other people interested in the wall, interested in the history, interested in preserving the history. And while I know other people had worked on it for quite a long time before that, I had not encountered these people. And I am so grateful to have met Stephanie and all the people involved in getting this wall preserved. And Squire Park and the Neighborhood Council will do all we can to help make sure that the recognition is accomplished. Thank you again, Stephanie.
Well, I just want to say thank you, Joanna, and the Squire Park Community Council, because this is truly an effort. It's become a community concern. So it not only is a concern that engages BHS, but the Seattle Chapter Black Panther Party, and Historic Seattle, for culture beyond integrity, the neighbors, and above all, the full support of the owner of that property. And it's not always, as we're not always as hopeful with owners as we are with this particular piece. So I hope that the owner is joining us here tonight. We're in conversations with her about next steps and what she can do as an advocate as well. She feels strongly that the wall should be restored, maintained, and that we create some sort of designation for the wall, historic designation. I don't know, Elmer. I see that Aaron's back with us again. Taylor, are we going to be able to hear Aaron?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, history informs us, and it is so important to keep up with our history. And I'm asking people to support the mural on 19th and Spruce, which is where the location of the Black Panther Party Community Center was located. And that mural was painted in 1969 when the Black Panther Party was under ferocious attack, as well as we were in Seattle by the Seattle Police Department and by the FBI. So that mural that depicts the struggle that was taking place at the time has a picture of Angela Davis, John Coltrane, Bobby Seale, and many others. And that mural has been around for damn near 50 years. And we would like it to stay around for another 50 years. It needs a little bit of work. So I'm asking people to, if you haven't seen the mural, go by and see the mural. It's a very, very moving mural. And support the mural. Support the mural so that it can be refurbished somewhat, and also so it can become a historical landmark. So thank you, everyone. All power to the people.
Right. Well, we should add that Aaron sent us that recording from New Mexico. Right. Elmer, he's living in New Mexico now.
Yes.
But very much connected here. Right.
Yeah, we're currently working on a museum and research center, and having this wall as an example of the legacy of the Black Panther Party is critical.
Right. That was going to be a question. One of my last questions to you was that, what do you say to the Seattle community about organizing for a cause? Because
organizing what?
You've been doing that all your life, nearly.
Yes.
About organizing for a cause, because that's something that, you've been doing since mid-1960s and today.
Well, I think it's really about standing on, the principles that you your struggle, your cause originated from. We always, I think the thing that allowed the party to run for as long as it did under the extreme attacks and devices of the FBI was the fact that we always stood on the principles of the Black Panther Party. And I think that young people who are organizing today, as you figure out what you're organizing around, that it's important that you identify what your principles are and stick to them. I also tell young people, it's not about how many of you are in your organization. It's about the fortitude. It's about the heart and the desire to want to promote change and be a part of that change. In a small number, I think it was one of the authors, Mead, says that it takes but one person to make a difference. And so it's important to understand what your struggle is and to build a foundation. The foundation of the Black Panther Party was our 10-point program. All of the programs that we ended up running came out of those 10 points. The very first program that we started, launched both in Oakland and here in Seattle, was the Police Alert Patrol, where we patrolled the police with weapons and law books to make sure that they weren't murdering innocent Black people in our community. And that came from point number 7 of the 10-point program that says we want an immediate end to the murder of Black people in our community. Everything came out of that. The breakfast programs, all of the various programs that we had over the years, a decent housing fit for the shelter of human beings, our summer liberation schools. Point number 5, we want education fit. We want education that exposes the true nature of this decadent American society and our role in present day society. They all came out of the 10-point program. So for young people organizing today, it's important to know what you stand for and to have a platform and a program so that you can build around it and work within your community.
I hear you. And I'm a true believer in the collective voice too, and community. So one of the things, before we have a few minutes for some Q&A, I just want to say that there are some ways that BHS will advocate for the People's Wall. We continue to advocate for the People's Wall. And so we're going to continue to pursue what everyone has mentioned here tonight, is the restoration of the wall. We want a thorough check so that we can address some of the minor fixes that we can see. We would ask the conservator to come in and give us those recommendations. There's already been some eyes on it from City of Seattle, but we would love to see something in writing with some specifics. And then, of course, beyond the stabilization of the wall, to refresh the paint. You're correct about that when you said possibly reaching out to Eddie or another artist in the community would be fabulous. And so we're hoping and thinking that we might be able to fund some of that as we're on our way with support from Historic Seattle with a spring campaign that some of you here tonight may have seen. If you haven't, if you go to Historic Seattle website and see our campaign for historic preservation and African American heritage sites that are local. We want to call on the community team and build a community team. Last year, BHS was in discussions with some folks who had interest in joining us, and we're feeling more comfortable now to convene that group and to take on the history combined with all that we need for significant statements and to present a nomination. So we're feeling very strong, although we realize that this may be the first mural that would come before the landmarks board. I'm not sure, but we're willing and up for the challenge. And then we lean into the community advocates, the history keepers, to rally around this nomination that we hope will lead to a designation. So we're committed all the way, Elmer, and hope to see the legacy preserved.
Well,
So,
and let me just say, I want to thank you guys. I want to thank Historical Seattle and your committee staff for all the work that you are doing and have done and will continue to do, not only in support of the People's Wall, but all of the projects that you work on. We know that this couldn't happen without you, and you've been dedicated to doing this work, and we're so grateful, and the community is grateful. So again, thank you from all of the comrades that are still alive.
yes, I know, and there are a number of them. Enjoy seeing them and meeting them all the time. And I don't know, Taylor, are there any questions? Do we have time to address any questions that may have come through the chat?
We've got a few minutes, and the first question, a couple of comments in the chat, and I'll read those. And I also want to say thank you both. And Elmer, I absolutely second what you said about Stephanie's continued contributions to just preserving Black history all over the state. Doing a phenomenal job. And Elmer, thank you for staying awake for this. Really appreciate it.
Yep, you got a few more minutes.
I know, 4 minutes, and then you can go back to sleep. Our first question came from Mary, and she wants to know if the sign was saved. It was the sign that Aaron was holding.
Yeah, I don't know if that sign was saved. My wife has figured out that I'm awake, so she's texting me. That's a good question. I have not seen anyone that has the sign. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist someplace. And there may be a need to do a search for it, but I have not seen it in years. I know that the Seattle Police Department, once we got out of the building, I was actually in prison at the time. They kind of ransacked the office, and it's no telling what happened to that sign. But someone may have it. So that's probably a search that we can do.
It'd be great to recover that and restore it. And then I'll just quickly read a couple of comments, and then there's another question. Liz, comment that came after this question was, another activity to physically protect the Central District was the Panthers helping to fight the R.H. Thompson Freeway. And I did not know that. So that's a mystery. Thank you, Anna, for sharing that fact.
Yeah, what the city planners were doing was to partition off the CD with a freeway down MLK connected to I-90. We were going to be boxed in, and we were part of the Seattle Freeway Revolt. In fact, there's a documentary that's been done about the Seattle Freeway Revolt. And so we were part of that effort to stop that freeway from ever being built. It was going to run right down MLK. And it was going to box this, it was going to carve the CD up. That was in 1970. It was around the same time that the wall was painted. Yeah.
There's a comment from John. It's a Margaret Mead quote. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Absolutely.
That's the quote that I was looking for. Absolutely.
Thank you, John. And then we've got a question from Taha. Thank you, Taha, for your question. Taha says, Elmer, thank you so much for speaking today. Now that the time has passed, when you look back on it, why do you think the first Black Panther location outside of California or Oakland happened in Seattle?
Wow, that's that's an interesting question. I think the timing, we were poised and we were ready for something to happen. Seattle has always been at the forefront of a lot of Black activism, the Northwest. As I said, people across this country, Black people, young Black people were growing up during this era. When you think about the rebellions in Watts and the rebellions in Detroit, these were Black communities that were rising up and fighting back. And here in Seattle, of course, we were watching these things at 15 and 16 years old, but everything had not hit the peak yet. The peak was building. Growing up seeing the Bloody Sunday and the 16th Street Baptist Church being bombed, you don't realize how that's impacting you as a child. I was 13 when the church was bombed and when Bloody Sunday was happening, but we saw these things on TV daily. And, at some point, these things culminate. And it was the perfect storm when Stokely came, and, it's like a big awakening. It's kind of like, this is who we are and this is why we're here. And the party had started in '66 and was getting its footing in '67, and in '68 it was just the timing. When MLK was assassinated and we attended that West Coast Conference of Black Student Unions, we were there in that moment. And so right. we Bobby Seale's first book was called Seize the Time, and we seized the moment. And Bobby Seale saw that as an opportunity to seize the moment, to seize the time, because we were the catalyst for an explosion of Black Panther parties all across the country. But these young people across the country were ready, like we were. We just happened to be there at that point in time to be the first chapter outside of the state of California, and we were ready. We were ready for the charge.
I made that note. Too. When you said perfect storm, I wrote it down right here too. The perfect storm. If there could be one, that was it. and
Yep.
and activism in the Black community. You're right. I mean, early as the turn of the century with NAACP and their march against Birth of a Nation, you know, showing the film Birth of a Nation here in Seattle. So there's always been a strong effort in the Black community, one way or another, and through different iterations of, you know, getting to the justice that we're still working on today. So this has been a really great conversation. I feel like we could kind of go on and on, Elmer. One, it wasn't now almost 2:30 in the morning in Portugal. And
It is
You know.
2:30 and I'm gone.
2:30. Yes, thank you so much. And Taylor too. I know we're over just a few minutes, but please, anyone who has interest in the People's Wall, reach out to us through Historic Seattle. We're anxious to get going now. We are feeling very comfortable and confident about moving forward with the People's Wall. So thank you, and Elmer.
I'm going to say goodnight.
Always,
pleasure.
Elmer.
And everyone
All right.
listening, in the follow-up email, I will include links so that you can support the work. I'll also include all of the clips that we showed in today's presentation so that you can run those back and really soak up
Good
all
night,
the
everyone.
info and history. Good night, everyone. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Elmer.